The Mid-America Veterans Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. Your donations serve to further the museum's mission of sharing and preserving the stories of our veterans. To donate, visit mavm.org and click on Donate. The content covered in this podcast is for general informational, historical, and educational purposes only. Discussions about historical events, military service, personal experiences, or sensitive topics are presented for educational and archival purposes. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the host and/or guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy or endorsement of the Mid-America Veterans Museum. Neither the organization, host, director, nor the guest shall at any time be liable for the content covered, causing offense, distress, or any other reaction.
Welcome to the Operation Insight podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum with your host, Jason Galvin and Sergeant Ethan Gross. Welcome back to the show, Operation Insight. Normally I let Ethan introduce our guests, but I felt pretty strongly about this one, and I wanted to introduce Mark Schmitz, who's the Gold Star Father of Lance Corporal Jared M. Schmitz, United States Marine Corps, Rifleman Ghost Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, who was killed in action on 26 August 2021 at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan, along with 12 of his brothers and sisters. And Ethan, I know that this is an extremely important time for you as well, and I appreciate everything you've done to get Mark here. And Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and your busy schedule to give us this opportunity to meet with you and really memorialize Jared. Ethan, go ahead and take it from here, brother.
I appreciate those words, Jason, and I appreciate the sentiment. So yes, this is officially our Memorial Day episode, and it's a real honor to have Gold Star Father Mark Schmitz here to commemorate and memorialize his son, Marine Lance Corporal Jared Marcus Schmitz. I want to read something before I begin asking Mark some questions about his son. Jared Schmitz was born on February 25th, 2001, to Mark and Sue Schmitz. From a remarkably young age, Jared demonstrated a deep sense of purpose and patriotism. At just 8 years old, he expressed his dream of serving his country in the United States military. During his junior year at Fort Zumwalt South High School, Jared enlisted in the United States Marine Corps through the Delayed Entry Program. Once he made his decision, he dedicated himself fully, regularly training with fellow recruits and preparing mentally and physically for the path ahead. Jared graduated from Fort Zumwalt South in May 2019. And officially enlisted in the Marine Corps on July 8, 2019. Jared reported to Camp Pendleton, California, where he completed the 13-week Marine Corps recruit training. He earned the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor Medal on September 20th, 2019, a moment of great pride for both Jared and his family. He graduated from recruit training on October 5th, 2019. Jared was subsequently assigned as an infantryman with the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines at Camp Pendleton. Jared's service took him to Jordan, followed by his deployment to Afghanistan. And as Jason already mentioned, on August 26, 2021, Marine Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz was killed in action while conducting non-combatant evacuation operations at the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. He was one of 13 United States service members who lost their lives in a suicide bombing at Abbey Gate. The attack, carried out by ISIS-K, also resulted in the tragic loss of more than 160 civilian lives. Jared is lovingly remembered as a kind, gentle, and selfless soul. He possessed a warm sense of humor, a strong sense of justice, and a deep love for his family and friends. He stood up for others, believed in doing what was right, and lived with quiet courage and humility. Jared's bravery, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to the United States Marine Corps will never be forgotten. He is a true American hero whose legacy lives on in the hearts of those who knew and loved him. He is survived by his father, Mark Schmitz, who we have here today, his mother, Sue Livingston Schmitz, his stepmother, Jacqueline Schmitz. Additionally, he is survived by his siblings, brothers Cameron, Jake, and Travis, and sisters Ellie and Addison. Mark, thank you for letting me read that. I just wanted to set the tone, since this is our Memorial Day episode, of how incredible of an individual your son was. But I do want to mention that we are technically recording this episode in February. And so I want to pay homage to Jared because his birthday is in just a few weeks, February 25th. So, Mark, I want to reiterate, thanks for being here. Really appreciate your time. Something that you have said in a previous interview is that Jared would ask you about the show of patriotism after 9/11. So obviously he was still a baby at that time when that occurred in 2001. What can you recall about Jared's curiosity of the Americanism that followed that terrible attack?
Thank you for having me on, guys. Jared was obviously only 6-7 months old when 9/11 took place, which has a sense of irony behind it, that he was a baby when it started and he was literally one of the last to be killed at the end of the 20-year war. But when he hit the age of 4 or 5 years old and we had a chance to talk about things that he could understand at a certain level, he had questions about 9/11 and, shortly after one of those anniversary dates. And I explained to him, I said, the country was in utter shock on 9/11. I mean, rightfully so. It's pretty rare that the United States actually gets attacked. And when it happens, it's a big deal. And out of the literal ashes of the events that happened on 9/11, something rose up the next day. And I explained to him it was a really fascinating event to see the day after. If you went to a store, your local hardware store or Walmart or Target to try to find an American flag, it was tough to find one, because when that tragedy hit, we all were unified. And it didn't matter, politics, any of that. It was all out the window at that time. It was somebody came in and tried to screw with the U.S., and we as a country all stood shoulder to shoulder, proud and ready to defend it. I explained to him that was probably the greatest day in history for me personally, and I'm 55 years old. I mean, that day sticks out. It's probably the most important, pivotal day in my life that I can remember. Fast forward, and what happened to my son in Kabul, August 26th of 21, finding out in the middle of the night that happened, and the next day the news broke all over the country and the world, for that matter, on the names of who were lost, and my son was on that list of 13. Some time went by after I went to Dover to receive my son's body stateside, and we had to wait for them to do what they do over there, and before they released him to come home. But when he came home, ironically, which was September 8th, shortly before the anniversary of 9/11, as many of you know who were citizens and residents of St. Charles County, it was like it was like September 12th all over again. I mean, there were flags everywhere, every bridge completely covered, shoulder to shoulder with people, the shoulder along the highway, just thousands and thousands of people, which, you know, being the father of a fallen, for my family, it meant the world to us to see that, because people cared enough to stop their day, and some stood out there for hours. And, you know, when you're in the transport vehicle going from the airport to Bowie, it's a little bit of a blur. You know, you just see so many faces going by. Occasionally you recognize somebody, but for the most part, it's just faces, because it's a lot of people that you've never met. But I saw kids with their hand over their heart, waving a flag, some having fun because they didn't understand it, they're too young, but many others being very respectful. And when I know a lot of people thought that he was in the hearse, he was in the back of the Humvee, but when those kids saw the Humvee, almost every one of them that I saw just stopped, like, what is that? You know, and they could see the flag draped coffin in the back of that Humvee. And I saw mothers crying, you know, fathers, grown men, many, many veterans wearing proudly their Vietnam veteran hats and Korea War hats, and many of them with tears in their eyes. And every single person that I saw that I can recall was 100% respectful. It was amazing. And then when we pulled off at Cave Springs there, the final turnoff, I wouldn't call it mayhem. It was just 10 people deep, you know, and that's when I started seeing a lot of faces I really knew, and that's when it got really, really emotional for me. But I did have the opportunity, somebody, I don't remember who it was, videotaped the entire thing from the very first motorcycle all the way to the very last car. And it was probably 6 months or so afterwards that I actually had an opportunity to watch the whole thing from a vantage point of someone who was there. And it was from on top of a bridge, and it was just it was 20 minutes worth of motorcycles, and they weren't going slow. I mean, it was just bike after bike after bike. I think they did a count of like 1,100 bikes, Incredible. Something around there. The one thing that really stuck out for me too, though, while driving from the airport to Bowie, was the eastbound traffic. There weren't people, you know, lined up on that side because we were on the other side going westbound, but there were truckers that took it upon themselves to literally park side by side and come to a slow roll stop. And some of them got out of their cabs and climbed up on top of their cabs to get a good vantage point. And they knew what was going on. And I'm sure these guys were from all over the country, you know, and which forced everyone else to stop. And I had become friends with the highway patrol chief, and talking with him, you know, I've always tried to be respectful of other people, and I said, what about traffic? And, you know, this is, if they're going to shut the highways down, that can wreak havoc for other people trying to get through their day, you know, and he kind of just chuckled and said, don't even worry about that at all. He had a couple of people call and complain, and explain what it was and basically get over it, you know. And it was an incredible experience. I'm proud to have experienced it, but I hate the fact I had to.
Sure.
I think that I wish every fallen hero, regardless of military branch or service, police, fire, you know, prior to losing Jared, I always pulled over on the side of the highway when I saw or heard about a procession going to be coming through for a fallen officer. firefighter, what have you. It's just a respect I've always been taught when I was a kid. And I may have been the only one on the shoulder or a couple people, but I would hope that, these are people's lives. And how often are we losing a hero? It's not that often. Yeah. So, buck up and have some patience and respect the family that is burying a hero and pull over or, give way. And I think all of them deserve that kind of a homecoming. It's, I feel for our brothers that served in Nam and the experience they got coming home, which was god awful, horrific. I wish we could have a redo of that, and not the war itself, of course, but just treating them the way they should have been treated. And
sounds like a lot of them came out in support of Jared.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's probably more of them than any, at least identifiable by their hats.
Sure. It just shows how much they understand it.
Yeah.
And we've actually had a guest on, a female guest, that said that, she made it a point to be there. And she had others ask, hey, why you don't even know Jared? Why are you doing this? And she's like, because he's an American hero and I want to be there. He's part of my county, And so,
well, in fact, we'll give her a shout out. That's Linda Ragsdale that you're talking about. And the interesting through line with that, you may remember, Jason, her uncle was killed in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so she was a Gold Star family member. And just like what Mark is saying, those Vietnam vets, have that understanding, that brotherhood. She got it. She understood the weight of the moment.
Even though people around her didn't understand it. Yeah. That's incredible, Mark. I mean, like you mentioned, no one wants to have to experience it, but it is an awe-inspiring thing when you have to experience it to see the support that you get.
Yeah, St. Louis and St. Charles County really showed up for your family that day. And I appreciate you making that through line of the patriotism and the sense of Americanism people felt after the attacks on 9/11 to Jared's homecoming, and how everyone was unified in their love and support of Jared and your family. Tell us about Jared as a child.
Jared was, I'd never seen so much energy in a youngster. I know all of our kids are a little wound up, but I've got collectively 5 kids, and out of all of them, he was off the walls. I mean, just constantly bouncing around. And his most absolute favorite thing to do, we were living in a rental house, and it was laid out where the living room had 2 entrances to the kitchen area. So there was a wall there, but you could literally run a big circle through the living room, through the kitchen. And I would sit on the fireplace stoop with a little Nerf ball, football, and he would run. I mean, he could easily just walk 5 steps, turn around, and run and jump. Yeah. But he would always run all the way through the kitchen, and then he would literally launch himself through the air, and I'd throw the football to him.
That's great.
And he would crash into the couch, so he wouldn't hurt himself. But to him, he would do this for hours. I mean, I'm not kidding you. He must have run miles just,
full of life and energy.
Yeah, he was a natural athlete. Because his mom and I divorced, because of our divorce, she lived in South City and I lived in St. Charles County. So we had shared custody, and trying to coordinate that with athletics was near impossible.
Sure.
But the kid was gifted. I mean, anything he tried, basketball, baseball, football, soccer, hockey, I mean, he excelled at. He was one of those kids. And I've always regretted that for him, that he never really got the opportunity. He played freshman soccer at Fort Zumwalt West before we moved over south, and which I do want to do a shout out to Nicole. Her son was tragically killed in a training exercise, and Colin and Jared and Colin were freshman classmates at Fort Zumwalt West, and he died not even a year after Jared, I think. So she and I become friends, both Gold Star parents now.
Yeah.
But anyway, that he played soccer there, and so that was one year he got to actually play on a organized team. And unfortunately, And again, it's a regret of mine, but my work had me so busy that I couldn't always make it to all of his soccer games. I tried to make it to most of them,
Sure.
but you look back and you have a lot of regrets, and it's one thing that's always eaten at me, that I should have been at every game, or I should have been there for this or that. And he and I had a fantastic relationship. We were best of friends and also father and son. But
what traits did he share of yours? I'm assuming a lot, but I'd like to hear.
A smart ass, pretty much.
You saw a lot of yourself in him.
Yeah, I mean, he was friends with everybody. I tried to be as well, as much as possible. I can't recall a single enemy he ever had. He was the kid that if he saw somebody being bullied at school, he would be the one to step in between to make sure it stopped, because he understood what was right and what was wrong. Yeah. And he wasn't a big kid. I mean, he was about 5'8" or so, and it's not like he was just some big rip stud muffin out there that's going to intimidate somebody, but he
that didn't stop him.
No, he knew what the difference was, and he made sure that never continued. But I'll share a funny story with you. When for his funeral, we had our Monsignor. We're parishioners at Immaculate Conception and ICD, and Monsignor typically does services at the church. Well, that wasn't going to be allowed to happen, which I won't get into, but I asked him if he could please at least come to the funeral home and give a simple service there, and he agreed. And so Monsignor Ted asked my daughters for his, I guess you can call it a homily at the funeral home, but he said, I need one word from each of you that would describe your brother, so I can incorporate that into my talk. My oldest daughter, Elle, who's now 15, she blurts out, player. Monsignor looks at her. Jared liked the ladies. I mean, he had a lot of girlfriends, and he definitely liked the girls, but my daughter's like, playa to our Monsignor.
And say it that way, please.
So he kind of chuckles. He's like, I think I'm going to need a different word. But yeah, it was ironic because at his funeral, obviously there had a lot of people turn out to pay their respects, and I think I counted no less than probably 6 of Jared's girlfriends that showed up. And either.
Oh man, that's great.
Ain't no shame in his game.
I turned to my wife and I said, I sure hope my girlfriends don't show up tonight. But everybody loved the kid. I don't think he had a single enemy. He was well liked. Teachers loved him, and he was recently inducted into the Fort Zumwalt South Hall of Fame.
That's great.
I'm supposed to go up for a ceremony with that coming up soon, so that was very meaningful for our family.
Well deserved.
I found out that DJ Murray, our former neighbor, that was also an underclassman to Jared, actually is the one who submitted the report that got him nominated.
That's great.
To be honored there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you remember about when Jared approached you and said he wanted to join the military?
He's done it so many times, starting at around the age of 8 that, at that point, I explained to him, well, I wanted to be a sniper, a garbage man, and an astronaut at your age, all 3, So I didn't really think much of it, at that time. But as time went on, he got into the Call of Duty, arcade, the video game, and I think that really got him hooked on it, just playing around with all the weaponry and stuff. And, as any dad would, I said, look, that's all fun and games, and we can play together, and you can kill me all you want, but I get to reset my life. But when you're doing the real deal, you don't get a reset button, buddy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that, but
it sounds like he only got more resolved in it. There wasn't really a moment where he questioned wanting to join eventually.
No, there was no question. When when he graduated infantry school and all that, it was in the midst of COVID. So these poor guys are out there rucking it up in the mountains and with COVID masks on, and he's just dying out there. And
Unreal.
He goes out to 29 Palms, and he calls me. He's like, "There's not a damn palm tree here."
Yeah, it's a misnomer.
But he said that, is there any way I can get a medical discharge and get out of here? And I said, Jared, you've been wanting to do this so long. And I said, what are you going to do? Because if you come home, you're going to be locked up in the house anyway.
Sure.
But we're not doing anything here either. All this 6-foot nonsense we have to all adhere to. And I said, just tough it out. Eventually you'll get a chance to do something else. And
what was his main concern? What was making him start to have those doubts?
I think boredom. Just he wasn't being challenged anymore. It was the same. I mean, he was an athlete. So I don't think all the hard workouts that they were putting these guys through really were challenging him much anymore.
Sure.
And not that he was that big of a stud, but he just it didn't. Like when you first get in there, of course, you're probably puking your guts out with all the running and the push-ups and everything else. But he had grown accustomed to those routines, and then the boredom just sets in. I mean, he loved being able to, learn how to throw the grenades and shoot. And the kid I'd taken him pistol shooting before, and he was a hell of a shot, but I'd never taken him long rifle. Especially iron sight stuff, and this kid was insane.
Natural.
Oh my God, yeah, and it's got to be from all the Call of Duty. But, I teased him. I said, "You might want to think about going into sniper school." And he said, "Nah, Dad, too much math."
No doubt. What was the what do you consider the biggest draw for the Marines versus the other service branches?
Most of my family was Navy, so I'm going to wrap that question up real simple and say my son just wanted to crack the jokes.
Gotcha. I got you.
Now
thank you for the ride is where the real men go.
I knew he wanted to push himself, and he knew the Marine Corps was going to be the place to do that.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not downplaying any of the other branches, of course, but we all know that the Marine Corps is you're going to get rung through the ringer there.
Yeah.
And if you can make it through that, you're pretty much welcome to go to the other branches.
What do you remember his description was of getting that Eagle Globe and Anchor to you?
It was actually very brief. He called me, and he sent me a picture of it in his hand, and he was very, very proud of that. That meant the world to him. I mean, that meant he finally did it, know, and it's difficult because he's in Pendleton, I'm here, and it's all over the phone or FaceTime, and we all gathered around, told him how proud we were of him, but it just loses the luster if we were actually there.
Sure.
But
whenever we have a guest on, Mark, who has some sort of military family legacy, we always want to explore that. So if you know some of the details, you said some uncles of yours have been in the Navy.
My father, I was adopted, but my adopted father was Navy on an aircraft carrier. My wife's father is retired Navy. Her brother, Mike, was also Navy. And then I had a cousin in the Air Force, a cousin in the Marines. There was a lot of military history in our family.
Absolutely.
I personally did not serve. I went to college right after high school, and I graduated in 95 from St. Louis U, and trying to find a job at that time was a flipping nightmare. I actually considered, hell, I might as well just go, try my hand at the military too, and then I ended up landing a job. So it never happened for me, but...
which branch do you think you would have chosen?
Probably not the Marines. I'm not as tough as my son.
Would you have gone Air Force? So you got the good rooms and the good food?
I probably would have helped invent Space Force.
There you go.
Something with a chair.
Right on.
I mean, I'm a drone pilot. That's what I do for a living. Now these guys have got much better, more fun drones than I've got, but it probably would have been in some sort of aviation capacity, more than likely.
Nice.
Did those relatives have any influence on Jared? Did they talk to him before he joined?
Not really, no. I think his uncle Mike, who now lives in Texas, he talked to him a bit. And his Papa Avenevoli, my wife's dad, he would just mess with him. It's just
Sure.
a personality.
Yeah.
But before my adoptive father passed, he was in a home, and when Jared came home after graduation and whatnot, I forced him to put his dress blues on, and we're going to go see Papa at the home. And so my dad got to see him.
How about that?
My dad wasn't
That's awesome.
mentally there,
Sure.
and
Sure.
when Jared walked in the room in his dress blues and his white lid on, which I know you're not supposed to indoors, but in his room, we wanted the full effect.
Yeah.
And his eyes just lit up, and he literally just struggled getting out of his chair, and he stood up and gave Jared a full
Incredible.
salute. And,
That's
Oh, my
beautiful.
gosh.
That's awesome.
What a moment.
and then he died, I guess, just a couple months later. So.
Wow.
Wow.
What do you remember about the last time that you got to physically be in the presence of Jared?
Well, he came home. Of course, he's a young guy that loves the ladies, so it was a fight and a struggle to kind of gain his
schedule
attention.
was full.
Right. He was constantly, on the hunt to hang out with friends and whatnot. And, you don't think anything of it.
Yeah.
He's going to Jordan. That's just going to be more training, but at least in a different place. And we were excited for him. You're always nervous about that, but, we weren't thinking much of it at the time. And so, of course, I gave him whatever freedoms he wanted, and,
Sure.
he came and went as he wanted to. So we spent some time. My son was 20 when he was killed, so therefore, he never drank before he was 21.
Sure.
Until we found out that he slept in the basement at our house, and his bedroom was just outside the bar of our basement.
Gotcha. Great placement.
We were cleaning out closets and stuff after the fact, and sure enough, there's all these empty beer bottles and vodka bottles, and I said to my wife, I'm like, why on earth would he hide it here in the closet? All he had to do is throw it in the trash. We wouldn't have known any better anyway. But no, we definitely hung out. I mean, his sisters and whatnot, they were always very close. He was always very protective of his sisters. He was an excellent big brother, which I could really use his help right now, because now they're 14 and 15.
Oh, yeah.
And,
There you go.
oh, my Lord.
It's a tough age, man. I've got one at 14
Jason
too.
knows about that.
Yeah, my gray hairs are popping out like crazy. Man.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that he was set to deploy to Jordan, and I've heard a few interviews that you've done, Mark, and some other folks. A tour to Jordan is not going to be a combat deployment, as we all know. So when do you remember that Jared got the call that he was deploying to Afghanistan?
He texted me, and this was, I think he landed there the 15th of August. So it would have been a day or two before that. But he texted and said, they're moving us. I can't tell you where. Well, I followed the news. I knew exactly where he was going.
Yeah.
But he was following protocol and being a good junior Marine. And, I told him, this is it. This is, you guys are going to be doing some exceptional things out there, and learn from this. Remember your training. All your brothers and sisters have got your 6, and you've got theirs. So just do it all by the book, and be safe. And he said, I know. I love you, Dad. And, prior to him, I do want to backtrack for 1 second.
Sure.
While he was in Jordan, he actually got to shoot with the DM, the designated marksman. And so I once again tried to get him to go into sniper school.
Yeah.
But he told me it was too much math.
Yeah.
But, the scary part was when they landed in, I think he went through Kuwait first, and then rerouted from there to Kabul. But when they landed in Kabul, the first time I talked to him, it was probably good 18, 20 hours after they landed.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever heard fear in my son's voice. Mm-hmm. He tried to hide it, I could tell, but he was scared to death.
Yeah.
He said, finally, he opened up and he said that he thought that they were going to die that first day, because it was just, we all remember the chaos. It was absolute insanity over there, and just thousands, tens of thousands of people flooding the airport. And, imagine a small regiment of guys, I think we've finally gotten the 5,000 number count, but I don't even think it was that high at first. It was just a couple of thousand, and them trying to corral and organize and bring down the insanity level. I mean, and you can't fault the people that were there. I mean, they thought that if they got turned away, they're dead, and so what do you do? So you're going to, it's fight or flight. And they had that instinct kicked in that one way or another, they're going to have to get saved. And so our kids, being on the defensive end of that, you're trying to be respectful, but at the same time, you're trying to make sure that you're maintaining order. So these kids, I guarantee you, were not trained for something like that.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did they get any training in crowd control? Because, a scared crowd is a dangerous thing.
I can't answer that. I don't know specifics on whether or not they actually touched on that. But one thing I do know for sure is they were not trained on how to accept foreign SIV paperwork.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the things I keep going to D.C. barking about, is that you put these kids in an unattainable situation that they had no idea what the hell they were doing. State Department was operating on banker's hours. They'd show up at 9 a.m. and leave at 5, and these poor Marines are sitting there babysitting Afghans on the wall right outside the canal, and there was no sense of urgency on the State Department. And that's, again, why we threw such a fit in D.C. about it. That, this should have been, states should have just got the hell out of the way and let the Marines and the Army handle what they needed to do. That's a fight for another day, and we're continuing that. But
I can answer that crowd control question from an Army perspective. There was no training. And Mark's exactly right. There was no training in terms of how to accept paperwork for the refugees. Before we began recording, I was sharing with Mark my personal connection to that Operation Allies Refuge. And my role in that operation was as a linguist. And I'll just tell you from my perspective, I only met a handful or so of other U.S. military linguists while they're at HKIA. And there should have been dozens upon dozens of linguists to help
because of the number of people that were there.
Yes, and the language barrier. And there was very little planning, from my perspective, very little planning in terms of that operation and how it was going to be carried out. So I can't speak from the Marine side, but if I was a betting man, I would say they didn't have any training either in regards to those things.
And they shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. You should not have been at HKIA. You should have been at Bagram, which we all would agree would have made a hell of a lot more sense, and the crowd control and everything else. It's a fortress over there.
Yeah, a much better stronghold. And there was a lot more control that could have been had at the Bagram Air Base.
Oh, absolutely.
As opposed to in the middle of Kabul.
Well, yeah, right in the middle of an urban area where people that may not have made that trek all the way to Bagram.
Exactly.
It was too easy being right there in downtown Kabul.
Exactly. You made a comment earlier. I wanted to attach a quote of yours. You had talked about, trying to save everyone. If I understand correctly, in that same phone call where Jared expressed his doubts and his fears, he also said, Dad, we can't save everyone here. Yeah. When you heard that from your son, how did you feel?
My heart broke because I knew how important it was for him, and I'm sure all of his buddies that he served with, to do the very best job that they could do, and they were significantly outnumbered. And you're talking hundreds of thousands of people trying to compress into a small airport with just 5,000 total troops trying to man multiple gates. I know you were at the South Gate and Jared was at the Abbey Gate, but the Abbey Gate ended up becoming like the main thoroughfare for them to try to get through. So
you feel pride that your son...
Oh, 100%. But I also felt terrible for him because it was a mission that I knew he wasn't going to be able to accomplish to the level he wanted to.
Yeah.
And no matter what, he was going to come out of that feeling like he failed because, babies are being thrown over barbed wire fences, and some of them get hung up in that and die. And, you know, some people are beaten to death or shot right in I mean, that was the thing that I've talked to several Marines that were there. The Taliban were literally opening fire on civilians right in front of these Marines that could not do anything about it, which is ridiculous.
Sure.
You know, and I hope and pray that my son didn't have to witness any of that, but I'm sure he did because he was down alongside
trenches.
Yeah. And, you know, that they purposely spread these kids out, our Marines out along the canal, so that they weren't ever in a situation where they were fully compressed in a small radius. And that's part of, again, the fight we have in D.C. because somebody gave the order. I don't know if it was his Captain Ball, who this was his first
deployment.
His first active situation, and he's now a full bird. And this man froze. He did nothing when the bomb went off. Literally did nothing. But prior to the detonation, he collapsed that column of Marines, and I think it was him. They were staggered, you know, and brought them all in, and they were literally all relatively pretty tight. And so when that detonation happened, that's why we had so many casualties.
Mass casualty.
But I do recall that first conversation with Jared, that when they first went outside the Abbey Gate along the canals there, he said it was so packed with people, so tight that you literally, if your arms were down, you couldn't raise them. If they were up, you couldn't lower them.
Wow.
If you dropped your gun, God forbid, rifle, you know, you weren't getting it because you couldn't bend down to get it. You know, that was early on, and you know, they finally got control of it a little bit better, and we're able to start pulling people out. But I mean, you go back to that desperation of those poor civilians that were over there. Your heart bleeds for them, but I mean, they're literally waiting in feces-infested canals, you know, to try to get to safety, and some of them willing to give up their kids to give them a chance. And there's that famous picture of Nicole Gee holding that baby, and I mean, that happened over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, and I had the opportunity, and I'll probably tear up on this story because it rips me apart every time, but I was at a function that I was asked to speak at, and I gave my speech and talked about Jared, talked about our nonprofit and all this. And after I got done, I sat down, and they had another speaker come in, and it was an Afghani woman. Well, she wasn't present for my speech, I think intentionally. And she got up and started talking about her experience. She was at the airport there in Kabul, and she was rescued by our Marines. And in the latter part of her speech, she said, I remember very distinctly that my younger sisters and brother and myself were escorted through the gate. And it was a very nice Marine that got us through. And I turned to him, and I saw his name tag. Schmitz. And 20 seconds later, he was gone. So
it was on the same day.
Yeah. Literally under a minute before it happened. Wow. So he got them through right before that detonation. So,
and she remembered his face.
Yeah.
And the warmth that he gave off as a person.
Lost it. When I heard that,
I bet.
And I literally ran up. I think I scared the crap out of her because I just gave her a huge hug. And then they had to tell her who I was.
Yeah.
And
what a moment.
Yeah. I think it was deliberate. They wanted to, you know, make it powerful for both of us and not let either one of us know we were about to meet each other. And
powerful, man. That's a powerful story.
I love that you shared that story, Mark, because as someone who was there and as someone who saw a lot of devastating things, I can remember having a thought about the way someone conducts themselves in a high-stress potentially violent situation says multitudes about that person. And the fact that that Afghan refugee had shared that moment with your son and recalls him having a friendly face and showing her kindness, even just in his eyes, says multitudes about Jared as a person. And I'm not surprised by that. Everything I've heard about Jared is phenomenal. I really appreciate you sharing that. Something I wanted to ask. What can you recall was your mental space as a father of a Marine who was there at HKIA in this highly volatile situation and also taking in the media at the time? How did that affect you?
My pride for my son took over, and like my ex-wife was not thrilled at all with me that I went on TV and on radio right away. And I mean, it wasn't immediate, but it was shortly after. And I said, the world deserves to know about my son, what he did there. Collectively, they were part of evacuating 120,000 people. That's never happened in history. And I'm proud of that. And I knew there was a lot of answers that I didn't have yet, but I wanted everybody to know who my son was. And so that's where my mind was at, not many people. I know there's a lot of Gold Star families out there, unfortunately, but compared to the collective of the general public, we're a very, very tiny minority. And, they always say that you die twice, one physically and one when your name is read for the last time or spoken out loud. Yeah. And I knew it was obviously fresh, but I wanted everybody to know who my son was.
Would you recall for us and recount how you found out about your son's death?
So like many of us, we saw in the news that there was an explosion. And obviously I was very nervous because I knew, well, let me back up. One of my last times talking to Jared, he said that after he was put on break, essentially, to get some sleep, he was going to go out on the airstrip. So change of pace. And I'm like, oh, thank God. It's less chaotic in there and certainly a little safer. And that's where I thought he was. So when the bomb went off and they said it happened at Abbey Gate, I knew that's where he was posted at. Back in my mind, my heart sunk as I was hearing them go, there's 2 confirmed dead. Now there's 4, now there's 6, and it kept getting higher and higher. I'm like, oh my God, those poor parents, those poor Marines that were there to witness it, but in the back of my mind, I always thought Jared was on the airstrip. Yeah. So, and I knew they were busy, but obviously my phone never rang, never got a text. I called a buddy of mine who served. He was a Marine, and I said, hey, I'm getting a little nervous. I haven't heard from Jared. He's like, dude, did you see what happened? They're busy. His brothers got him. Don't worry. And I'm like, you're right. So went to bed, and it was approximately 2:42 in the morning. I usually sleep pretty heavy. They didn't ring the doorbell because our doorbell wasn't working, and it was a very faint knock. It wasn't even like a very loud one. Yeah. I guess respectful because it was the middle of the night, but somehow I heard it, and I guess maybe because of everything going on, I wasn't sleeping as deep as normal. But I remember we have a main floor master, and I walked out, and right there's the foyer, and we have a glass rounded inlay on the door. It was dark outside. Our landscape lighting lit up silhouettes in the window of the door, and there was 2 bodies there. And I'm like, what the hell? And I slowly walk up, and as I get a little closer, I could start to see medals on their chest, and I'm like, oh no. So I flipped the light on, I opened the door, and they introduced themselves and asked if they can speak with me. And I'm like, is this about my son? And they said, yes, sir. And I was trying to will it to be them there as giving me an injury report.
Sure.
Just trying to make it happen. That's what they were there for. And I guess in the back of my mind, I knew that was futile. But I said, "Come on in." I got my wife up, and we sat at the dining room table. And that's when they had to tell us that Jared was one of the 13. And I sat there. It's interesting. I've heard after the fact anyway. Either when you break the news like that to somebody, they either just literally lose it,
Sure,
or they're emotionless, and that was me. I just sat there, like, I guess in shock. Like, this is BS. They're not, this isn't really happening. It's a nightmare. And as soon as they left, which was roughly 45 minutes later, and the door shut, that's when it all hit me. I literally collapsed into my wife's arms. I fell to the floor, and I was just bawling and screaming, and she had to keep me quiet because we don't wake up the girls. Yeah. And the next, we didn't go to sleep after that. Obviously, we sat on the couch like, what the hell, But then before you know it, it's 6 a.m. It's time to get the girls up. What do you do?
How do you go about your day after that news?
So we sent the girls to school. We didn't tell them right away. We're like, we've got to get our heads wrapped around this and call grandparents and figure out next steps. And names weren't being released yet. I got a call from KMOX. I'm not sure how they got my name now that I think about it, but
yeah, how odd. They were the first media that got a hold of you?
Yeah, it was KMOX. And it was a fog because at that time I wasn't well versed on media, and I'd never been on TV or radio or anything like that. And I told them, I said, we haven't even told our kids yet. So out of respect for that, we need to keep the anonymity here. We don't want any names being released. Jacqueline's brother calls her from Texas at around 11 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, how'd the girls take it? She's like, we haven't told them. And he goes, what the hell do you mean you haven't told them? It's already on the radio.
Wow.
His name. And we were like, what? So we ran up to the school, called the school first, told them why we were coming. They were like very accommodating, of course. And we picked our daughters up and brought them home. And they're like, can we go to Chick-fil-A? Because they're like, why are we getting out of school early? They didn't know.
Some kind of treat or something.
And I'm like, we have to talk to you about something pretty serious, and we're going to do it when we get home. And they kept pushing us like in the car, like, well, tell us now. And I'm like, no, because they're in the back seat, we're in the front. That's not how you do it. So we sat in the hearth room in our house, and I started, which was a big mistake because I was right back to the front door again. Yeah. I just immediately lost it. And God love my wife. She was very strong and was able to stay pretty emotionally strong and get it out, what had happened. My daughters were like me initially, just in shock. Like, it took them a few minutes to process. And then, of course, they started bawling. And then I'm bawling worse. And, it was that next day was the worst day of my life, for sure, starting at 2:42 in the morning. I never want to experience anything like that ever again. And it's been rough on all of us, but especially my daughters. We've had to put them into some counseling, and they hate the counseling, so it's a struggle to get them to go and open up at all. And there's a lot of things that happen bad to people afterwards that don't get the help that they really need, and that's where my daughters were for a while. And
well, I want to congratulate you and Jacqueline for doing that for your daughters.
Yeah, for sure.
And having the mental acuity and awareness to know that they were going to need that support and help.
No, they still do, and they're not going anymore. They think that they've overcome it, but as a parent, there's too many scars from this now that haven't been dealt with, and it's been a struggle to get them to open their minds to going again. But
and it's tough. It's a little bit of a different parallel for me. They were siblings. Mm-hmm. And at that time, they were probably 9, 10, 11, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And when that knock happened for me, I was a son, but 11 years old. And I can tell you, just being that age, you don't know how to process it. In fact, I dealt with it in ways that I didn't even understand. So I can I can kind of empathize, even though it was a different relationship, the age and any relationship of any kind with a military member who is killed tragically. I already know is going to be very tough, man. So I can empathize, Mark, and with that piece of it, man, that stuff. And really, to be honest with you, there's so much whirlwind that happens around stuff like this. I can empathize with the media stuff so quickly and things of that nature. It's a really tough thing, man.
I think there's probably a misunderstanding that children will be able to get over it more easily than an adult, and really, those are probably the population that need it the most.
Yeah, because they're inward mostly with those feelings.
Yeah,
because you don't know what to do with them. As a kid, you don't know what to do with that.
Exactly.
Right. And you see everybody else around you affected, and you can't fix it for those people that are around you, and you actually take that on yourself sometimes.
Yeah. So Jared's homecoming, and I know we referenced this earlier. That was September 8th, and like you had said, just a few days before the anniversary of 9/11. And you had referenced the funeral at Bowie Funeral Home. I'm curious to hear about the final funeral at Jefferson Barracks. Would you tell us about that afternoon?
They shut the highway down again, and we made it known that we wanted the interment to be private, but there were still a lot of people that came to the cemetery to be a part of the final prayers and whatnot, and the gun salute, and that was again awesome. I mean, the people again were out. It wasn't as packed as it was on his homecoming, but there were still thousands of people out there, and you're never ready for that gun to go off on the salute. Yeah. Taps to this day crushes me every time. Yeah. Certainly did that day, and I was the last person in the room at Bowie when they closed his casket. I reached my hand in there to touch him one last time, and I went to his interment and insisted being there at the gravesite when they lowered him down. As Catholics, we believe that he's around us every day, and I firmly believe that. So out of respect, I'd still go to the cemetery to see him, but that's not my son there anymore. My son's with me everywhere I go. And
does he speak to you?
Oh, all the time.
Give us an example of something he says to you.
Well, it's a routine and a ritual I do now. Every single morning and every single night, I say good morning and good night to him. My wife surprised me with a ring that they took his thumbprint and molded it and had it cast into a ring, which ironically doesn't fit my hand. So I leave it on right next to my computer, and I literally pick that up every morning, every night. I kiss it, I rub it, and I pick pictures of him everywhere in my office, of course, and I talk to him literally every day that way. But whenever I'm struggling, he's the first person I turn to besides God. Like when I'm having issues with his sisters, what's the next dramatic thing they're going to deal with? Like, if you can help me out with your sisters, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I will share one story with you. I don't remember the exact dates now, but it was at least a year after we lost Jared. I am a very strong believer in divine intervention. And I was outside. We have a pool, in-ground pool with an infinity edge. And I was out there blowing leaves and stuff after a storm we had and clearing the pool deck. And I've done it countless times. And I know the layout of the backyard. It was broad daylight, so I could see everything just fine. And I'm 100% convinced that my son, when I was at the very edge of the pool by the infinity edge, it drops off about 8 feet down onto some boulders. And I'm convinced to this day that my son gave me a little, nudged me off the edge and made me fall, which hurt like hell because I landed on these boulders on my back and stuff. And I literally couldn't move. I thought I was paralyzed, but I was in extreme pain. I'm like, okay, well, that's a good thing because that means I'm not paralyzed. So we got me to the emergency room, and they did MRI and x-rays and stuff, and there was this large mass right in the area of the back, lower back, that was ironically where I fell. And they said, well, you're probably bleeding internally. It's a hematoma. And come back in about 3 months, we'll rescan, and it should be either gone or much, much smaller. So I did the manly thing. I waited like 9 months. And instead of it being smaller or gone, it was actually bigger. It turned out I had stage 3, level 4 kidney cancer.
Oh, my gosh.
I had no symptoms, nothing, and no idea I even had it. And that potentially could have been fatal.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm convinced. I mean, I'm not a clumsy guy by any means. I never fall. And somehow, some way, my son knocked me off the edge of that wall to make it so I had to go to the ER to get checked out.
Same spot in the body that they'd have to check out later.
Yep. Wow. And so within a couple of months, I had the kidney removed, and I went through all my treatments, and I rang the bell, and knock on wood, I'm doing all right now. And
congratulations.
Down a kidney, but
that's incredible.
So
that's awesome.
And then this could be superstition, but there's been a lot of things that happen in your life that I had thought about running for school board out in Wentzville to make a difference and help my daughters out. And I started getting death threats, and I started getting threats against my business. My kids are getting threatened because they didn't want me to run for office.
Sure.
I guess because of my political stance. And I would lean on Jared on those. And I'm like, I need you to protect your sisters, and didn't know how far this was going to go. And it got so bad that I just bowed out. I'm like, this isn't worth it.
Sure.
This is a free position. I'm not even getting paid for it.
That's a shame.
But it was sick. But, luckily I've had mostly positive things happen since Jared with the community and everything. I've only had one instance when one gentleman came up to me and looks me dead in the eye, and he says, when are you guys going to get over it? And I said, what are you talking about?
Wow.
I said, come again? And he literally looks me dead in the eye. Well, first he comes up and he goes, I'm so really sorry for your loss. Shook my hand. I'm like, oh, it's just another one of those, right? I mean, you do that 1,000 times. But he says that, and I said, well, excuse me? And he repeated himself. And he goes, and he was referencing all 13 families. And he said, all I hear about is the 13. When are you guys just going to get over it already? My wife overheard this. This was after like a big function, like a gala or something we were at. And ironically, there was a bunch of Marines that were standing behind me. They came over because they heard it.
Yeah.
My wife heard it. She knew I was about to unload on the guy. And these Marines go, sir, we got this. And I don't know what happened. I don't want to know what
Never
happened.
heard from him again.
It's so unreal how people can be so ignorant.
Heartless.
Yeah, it's just ignorance, man.
Yeah.
Well, and it brought me back to the guys in Nam, the crap
Sure.
they dealt with when they got back here. And, I'm like, if this was anything even remotely close to what they had to deal with, it's disgusting, and I don't care what side of the aisle you're on.
Yeah.
I mean, our military is here to protect every single U.S. citizen, our freedoms, our right to speech, everything. That needs to be respected across the board.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with war or not, that's irrelevant. I mean, it takes a very special person to me, any enlisted person is a hero because you made that first step that so many other people don't do, and that's to sign on the dotted line and volunteer.
Absolutely.
An interesting comparison that I'm just thinking of here, Mark, while we're talking about the similarities in terms of the Vietnam veterans and what they went through. You had referenced this earlier. Jared was born in 2001, just months before a cataclysmic event, 9/11, and what would begin the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And, of course, as you referenced as well, Afghanistan went on for 20-odd years. And Jared was born the year that the event that would be the catalyst for the war in Afghanistan occurred. And you're right, he was one of the last service members to die in the service of that war. The evacuation that occurred for Operation Allies Refuge had a lot of similarities, and you may know this, had a lot of similarities to Operation Frequent Wind, which is when the Vietnam War ended for the United States. That was in April of 1975. And there's a lot of really strange similarities between the Vietnam War and the Afghanistan War. In terms of length, the war in Afghanistan far exceeded Vietnam. But Jared was literally part of a historical era in our country's history. And something I find really tugs at my heartstrings, we talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of the refugees. The work of Operation Allies Refuge, it's in the name, Allies Refuge. That evacuation, the withdrawal, part of the purpose of that was to save Afghan lives. Jared and the 12 other service members were putting their lives on the line, in many cases, for non-Americans.
People they didn't know.
People they didn't know. People they had no allegiance to. And so for someone to ask you an asinine question like that or say, why aren't you over it yet, just does not understand the weight of what occurred there and does not understand the significance of their sacrifice. About a year after the Abbey Gate bombing and Jared's death, the museum here, Mid-America Veterans Museum, dedicated a memorial, a monument to the fallen 13. I'm guessing you were at that event?
Yeah.
What do you recall about that day?
It was unreal to see. We have a monument out at Friendship Brewing that was made in honor of Jared by himself, but this was different. It had all 13, and you know that's since they all died together. We don't really think of just one. You know, privately, of course, we think of Jared, but publicly, when any of us that I'm aware of speak of our kids, it's always 13. And to see that I actually drove by there tonight on the way in here and stopped and looked at it and took some pictures again. And it's beautiful. I mean, it rocks you to your core to see that and see your son's name up there along with all the other heroes that perished with him. And I know the day that they unveiled it, they had all the pictures at the foot of it, which was amazing to see as well because it puts a face to the name.
It's one of the most talked about monuments at this museum on our grounds.
I think it's one of the most talked about in the St. Louis region and in St. Charles County.
Yeah. It has such deep meaning
Yeah.
for people here.
I mean, this monument here, man, is amazing.
And the story behind it is great, too.
Yeah.
A couple, not even from St. Charles County, but nearby, decided that they felt a need to memorialize the fallen 13. And so that monument was established here in conjunction with our museum.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gold Star families, Mark. And so I just wanted to get an overview of your experience August 29th, 2023, when you took part in the House Foreign Affairs Committee's Gold Star Family Roundtable. What was that like?
Long overdue. It was, as many people know, there was a lot of questions as to why this could have happened the way it did and the mistakes made and the lack of accountability and everything else. And none of us really had much of a voice. I mean, I've been on Fox News National, Newsmax, ONN, never got a call from some of the others. But every time you're on there, you get 3-4 minutes max, and half the time the news anchor is talking. So, and then you never know what questions you're going to get asked, and a lot of times they're kind of off the wall, and you're like, that's not at all what I was hoping we'd cover today. Yeah. And so you never really get an opportunity to say your piece. And when this was presented to us, I was 100% in, and because I knew this was an opportunity on a large platform. I think C-SPAN covered it live, and I think Fox News covered it, the whole thing. And I was talking to the Foreign Affairs Chairman, Michael McCall, at the time, and I said, how long are we allowed to speak? And he said, well, your wife's here too, so maybe 5-6 minutes. I looked at him, I said, are you serious? I said, I have written and rewritten, and I normally don't write speeches because I just talk from the heart, but I knew this was a little different, so I wrote a speech, and then I rewrote it, and I got it down to, from about 30 minutes down to about 15, 12 if I read it really fast.
Yeah.
And am I allowed to curse on this show?
Please, yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you'd like to say.
Because I said, sir, with all due respect, I have a lot to say, and this is the first platform I've actually been able to say it. And he looks at me and he goes, you know what, Mark, you say whatever the fuck you want to say. I'm like,
I love it.
That's all I needed to hear, sir. Thank you.
That's awesome.
And
You need guys like that.
Yeah.
Many people saw that, and I know my clip in particular went viral because of what I said.
Very passionate.
I meant every word of it. There were so many screw-ups that happened there, and my wife was like, you can't say that. I'm like, I don't care. This is coming from my heart, and I wasn't just cursing to curse. It's
for emphasis.
Yeah, and I quoted myself many times, and I said, I listed them out by name, who was exactly to blame for this, and I'm sure there's more. General Milley and
Blinken.
Yeah, for sure, and many others. Obviously, Biden and many others too. But I said, I want to see something actually happen. I'm so sick and tired of all these hearings and this and that, and nobody's ever handcuffed, nobody's ever arrested, nobody ever goes to jail, nobody ever gets demoted. In fact, the ironic part about all this is Captain Ball again. I mentioned him earlier. Yeah. He went from a captain to a major, and then Lieutenant Colonel Whitehead, the infamous guy that's above the sniper Tyler Vargas Andrews, who couldn't give an answer to whether or not he could shoot when he thought he had the guy.
Shot.
Yeah, he said, I don't know. And he's like, well, who the hell does know? And that guy is now a full bird. These downward promotions, you screw up and you get promoted up. It's like, it makes no sense. And I've been finding out from many vets that that's just the way it goes, know, and I'm like, that's disgusting. It makes no sense, and that should be revisited. But we had the opportunity to, after that, while we were still in D.C., General Milley watched the entire thing, and he heard myself and Darren Hoover. We're kind of the wildcats of the families. There were 8 of the families of the 13 that were represented there that day because we formed a coalition shortly after everything happened, and some of the parties have shifted a little bit. We dropped down to 6, and then we went up to 9, and we're back to, I think we're at 8 right now. But just different grieving things, political views, stuff like that is why there's certain parties that aren't part of our group. But the 8 of us have been fighting since day one, trying to get some sense of accountability or at least answers and hopefully change. And so we got a call from General Milley. He wanted to have a private meeting with us. And I know I was told by our handler that he was a little nervous with me and Darren because we're not afraid to speak our mind. And no offense,
loose cannons.
General, I don't know you shit. I didn't serve, so I'm going to talk to you like you're just another guy. But we had a private meeting with him in somebody's residence. That person left, and there was no media there. And it was supposed to be an hour. It went on for at least 2. One thing that really stuck out was he asked if we had any questions, and one of the family members said, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything different? And this POS literally says no. I'm like, you realize there's no cameras here, right?
Yeah, to be honest
are you freaking kidding me? But he knew we were fighting, so I think he had to do that to save
face.
Yeah, and not fuel the fire because he knew we weren't going to ever give up. Well, we're not going to give up.
He was giving you a corporate answer.
Yeah, and here he is now retired and public speaking and making endorsement money, and it's sick, and I'm glad we had the meeting, but it was pretty counterproductive, really. I mean,
well, it sounds like that's the moment you remember the most which almost makes me think the meeting almost wasn't even worth having.
No, I mean, it really wasn't. He tried to explain, all the things he's seen in his battle days and all the kids he's lost and how it impacts him. I'm sure there's some truth to some of that, but
a lot of lip service.
Yeah, you weren't boots on the ground there, and there were mistakes made. A high school student could figure that out.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have rerun that whole scenario and probably had 10 think tank kids figure out a better scenario to get that done.
Yeah.
Including not leaving our stuff behind and
sure
watching it in parades now on anniversary dates, by the Taliban driving around in their Humvees and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Really wrong.
But we're not only looking for accountability, we're looking for change.
Mm-hmm.
One thing in particular, and many people know this, many people don't. When a service member is killed, there's a death benefit of $400,000. It's
mm-hmm.
a standard life insurance policy, and that is sent out to the family pretty quickly. There's also an additional $100,000 that's sent out even faster. So you're looking at $500,000. Well, which is fine and dandy, and I'm not saying this because I care about money at all.
Sure.
But I found out this figure has been the same for decades. It has never changed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the $500,000 that the government gives out to a grieving family now is worth far less than it was 15, 20
Just
years
cost
ago.
of
Mark,
living.
let me tell you, in 1991, before they changed it for us, it was $50,000, and when my dad died, it was $100,000. And that was 1991.
Well, we're trying to petition that get raised, not proactive, not
Thank
going
you.
backwards. We want to see that raised to $1 million.
Sure. I agree.
And that would be for future forward, no, not our kids and not anybody before our kids, but just moving forward. You got to at some point just put a stop pin on it and start over, and that needs to be done. Secondly is the GI Bill. If you're a young Marine or airman or whoever and you've got a young family, great. The GI Bill can transfer to your kids. And,
mm-hmm.
well, most of the kids that were killed in Kabul were 20 years old, 21 years old with no kids.
Yeah.
And my son included. So he had apparently 6 girlfriends, but he wasn't married or anything.
Yeah.
But he certainly had no kids when he had 2 younger sisters. I'm like, why in the world would that GI Bill not be transferable to a younger sibling?
Sure.
At the very least. And
Absolutely.
that needs to be addressed.
I agree.
That's a great point, man.
And then lastly is this whole pad, I think is what it's called, where the young recruit goes in and they're given a stack of papers you got to fill out about your death benefit, your 401k, your profits, whatever you want to invest, and all this and that. There's so much paperwork that these kids are, half the time they're 18,
And they're just signing just to get away from
They don't know anything.
Yeah.
And we're all raised with mom and dad. That's how it's generally raised, is thought of as mom and dad. Well, most of the time these kids put mom down first and then and that's what happened in Jared's case. Well, the problem with that is that the person that's designated to handle everything has 100% complete power and control over everything.
Wow.
If that happens.
Sure.
And I'm not going to speak to personal experiences with it, but let's just say that needs to be readdressed. I know, these kids should be able to have time to consult with their families.
Sure.
Many young recruits are putting down their girlfriend that they're in love with for the last 3 months, and now this person literally gets the money and they control all the decisions of what happens to him or her. And all I'm saying is there's certain things that need to be sent home ahead of time that they can sit down either with an attorney or their family and go over everything, a financial advisor, whatever, so that those important documents can be gone through and
informed decisions can be made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the rest of it, the little, more non-important information, that stuff can be handled while you're getting screamed at by your new drill instructor you just met,
Wow, that is an incredible insight that I never even thought of.
Yeah.
My wife and I were not even allowed to really grieve the way we really wanted to grieve because we were dealing with all this other BS drama that didn't need to happen.
And that's like a kick in the pants because you weren't expecting it too.
No, it just needs to be made. The process, should be streamlined a little better and have these young kids who, let's face it, don't probably know the first thing about well, Dad, how much money should I set aside out of my check? I'm like, you have free food, free room and board.
Yeah,
You max that thing out and give away as much as you can to savings and let them match it, because you don't need much money to live off of.
Yeah.
And
but not only that, just to state it clearly, who is going to sit down and look at a document that says death benefits and take it seriously?
When you're 18 and you think you're invincible.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not fair to them.
And we don't even do that to people that aren't under pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you talking about that roundtable experience, and I'm grateful to the House Foreign Affairs Committee that they invited you guys to speak on your experiences and try to hold people accountable. And your speech was very impassioned, Mark, and I've watched it multiple times, and
I caught some death threats on that one too, but
well, I think you did a phenomenal job, and I think you represented Jared and the Gold Star families very well. I appreciated it as a service member. I'd love for you to tell us and our audience about the Freedom 13 organization.
Sure, I'd love to. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, and when we lost Jared, it was probably 45 days. I pretty much stopped working. My wife stopped working temporarily. She was back to work because she had to. She worked for a larger corporation. I didn't, and so I kind of just checked out. And then I let my mind start buzzing, and I'm like realizing real quick that when you're faced with a situation like this where you lose your son or your daughter, you can basically one of two things can happen. You could dig a hole, sit in it. Why me? Why my son? Why my daughter? And I'm not here to criticize the way anybody grieves, trust me. Or the other option would be to pick yourself up and move forward and or do something bigger and better and leave a bigger legacy for your young one that you just lost. And my son stood for helping people his entire life. And honestly, I know he would kick my ass if I didn't do something for him. And I knew right then and there that I was going to take the ladder and grow something in his honor. And so we formed the Freedom 13. The primary mission behind the Freedom 13 is to build recreational retreat camps in all 50 states, God willing. We have already started our first one in Bourbon, Missouri. These camps are going to be utilized or built for veterans and law enforcement and their immediate families. I think it's very important to include the family unit, because when someone's deployed or somebody's putting on a uniform and going out and hitting the streets at night, the family's essentially deployed with them.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
So having the family there, I think, is crucial. But we're going to build 13 houses because that's our number.
Sure.
And 13 houses on each of these camps. They'll be on at least 100 acres of land. Our first one is on 171 acres. It's a beautiful piece of property. There's a stocked lake for fishing. We've got an in-ground swimming pool. We have a tennis court that we have to resurface, but we're going to convert that into pickleball because that seems to be the thing now.
There you go.
We're putting in a sand volleyball court. There's about 4.5 miles of riding trails out there, so you can hike it. You can ride it on an ATV or side-by-side. The unique thing about the 13 houses, none of these are going to be the tiny houses.
Sure.
We initially thought about going that route because,
Sure.
it'd be more effective cost-wise to get those built because they're smaller. But in talking with my wife, I'm like, if we went to our own camp with our two daughters and spent the week there in a tiny house, are we going to come out of there more stressed or less stressed? And the answer was probably more stressed. So that was off the table right away. So we'll have 5 one-bedroom, 1 baths, and those would be about just under 500 square feet, which is perfect size for 1 or 2 people. The 2 bedrooms will be just under 800 square feet. They'll have 1 bathroom, 2 beds. And the 3 bedrooms will be 3 bed, 2 bath, and those will be around the 1,200 square feet. So not small.
For those larger families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, each house, the unique thing about this is that each house is going to be built intentionally with no kitchen.
Interesting.
You can't cook. There's nowhere to cook.
Yeah.
And that's designed on purpose because we have the 13th house.
Yeah.
is the main house. And a veteran or law enforcement officer we haven't decided on who that person is yet, will be an on-site live-in camp director, and their job will now be to run the camp, from landscaping to cutting grass to cooking meals. And the house that we have there right now, it's about 3,100 square feet. It's a nice large house, and part of that house is a huge room addition that serves perfectly as a chow hall, mess hall.
Yeah, how about that?
So you're forcing the guys and gals to come together for their meals 3 times a day.
Beautiful.
And each of the houses that we built are also, in lieu of having a kitchen, we took the kitchen space and we're converting those into golf cart garages.
Nice.
So each house gets assigned a golf cart.
That's great.
So you can move about the property.
Yeah.
You go in, have your breakfast, and when you're done, take your golf cart and your family, go wherever, do whatever you want. The entire property is fenced, so you can't possibly go out of bounds, you know.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose of it is therapeutic and healing. And for those guys that struggle with PTSD, anxiety, depression, suicide thoughts, you know, we want them to be around other people that have similar backgrounds, listen to each other's success stories and failures, you know, and take away a piece of somebody else that they've now befriended while they're there. And we want to build these safe places for other organizations that do have a niche or specialty, like therapeutic counseling for PTSD. Because I'll be honest, I'm out of my element on any of that stuff. I'm certainly not an expert by any means, and I would never claim to be. So my purpose is to build the camps that can bring in
the experts,
the people and the experts. Yes.
What a great vision.
And so it's a monumental undertaking. When I came up with it, I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And I didn't really start putting the numbers together. And now I have, and it's huge. It's going to be about $3 to $4 million per camp, depending on how much is donated. Like the land we bought for this one, we had to buy it. You know, there's $1.5 million right there. Yeah. That doesn't leave much room for capital to go vertical on building the rest of the houses. So that's why we're constantly having to fundraise. And we have galas, we have memorial rides, and our memorial ride is massive. Last year we had about 1,000 participants. Yeah. We opened up to bikers and cars, Jeeps, trucks. Anybody can come.
That's where my wife and I got to meet you.
Yeah.
And also we got to meet Greg Doolin, your senior brand ambassador, a retired Marine and Army veteran. Now that we're on the topic of events, because I want our audience to understand how they can support the Freedom 13, by the time this episode is released for Memorial Day in honor of Jared, you will have 2 events coming up before the end of 2026. You'll have the Freedom Backyard Ultra Marathon. That's June 6th through the 9th. And you just referenced the Angels of Abbey Gate Memorial Ride. That's August 15th, 2026. Would you tell us about the Ultra Marathon?
Well, number one, I will not be running in it. I've got a torn meniscus, so I'll safely be riding around in a side-by-side. But you sign up, you run 4.16 miles. You have an hour to get it done. That's not really a marathon, right? Well, let's say you finish it in 30 minutes. Now you get 30 minutes, you can sit around and relax, because at the top of the next hour, you're going to do it all over again. And it just repeats and repeats and repeats until you can't go anymore. Yeah. We're going to have a big bell like the Navy SEALs have when you tap out. You got to ring the bell. Everybody's going to have dog tags hanging on the barn wall. When you tap out, you go tear off your one dog tag. That's your take home. The winner, which happens to everybody's going to be a do not finish except for one person. So there's literally only one winner. This event could go on just a matter of hours. Sure. Or it's going to go on for days. And more than, I can guarantee you it's going to go on for days, because the Marine that actually came to me and approached me with this is an avid ultra marathon runner. And this guy is...
That's the one winner.
His name is Drake. He owns Muddy Banks Brewery down in Sullivan.
Gotcha.
And he said, I want to do this event. What do you think? And I'm like, well, where do you want to do it? He goes, how about right on your camp? So that's cool. The beauty of it. You're going to be running this race on our ground.
That's great.
Down there at the camp. So we've actually been spending the last several months clearing trails and getting it ready. And, obviously, dead of winter, can't do much. But The trails are just about done, and we'll do a final go through to make sure it's all clear of debris so nobody's getting hurt. But he'll be in it. And then a gentleman last year reached out to me. His name's Corey Burton. He's not from St. Louis. He runs something called the World Marathon, and he ran that last year wearing nothing but Freedom 13 gear. And it's this is a full-blown marathon, 26 miles, 7 days in a row on 7 different continents.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So we were running literally a marathon every single
That's
day
crazy.
for 7 days on 7 continents, and he finished. Woo. So he's going to be in this race.
Wow.
But he told me, he's like, I may not be that good at it because I'm used to running 26 at a time.
Sure.
Not the longest ultra marathon ever, I think, went 500 miles, if you can imagine that.
Incredible.
It went on for days.
That's incredible.
They run through the night.
Yeah.
You don't sleep. You literally just keep going, and you're pushing your body. And I encourage anybody and everyone to sign up for this. I mean, you just know you're already probably not going to win. Who cares?
Sure,
because it's how far can you push yourself?
Yeah.
This is a test of true wit and will within yourself to feel that burn and that ache and just keep pushing through it. And, if you make it one time and you're done, hell, I wouldn't even make it one time. But, if you make it 3-4 times, great. We're going to have electronic scoring, timekeeping and all that. We're going to have a live band there. We're going to have food provided. We're going to have, I own a mobile bar business, so I'll have my mobile bar there. It's a drink truck. So think of a food truck. There's no food. It's all booze.
I remember that from August.
So people could those that aren't participating can party and just, cheer on their loved one. And those that tap out, hang around and have a good time. And we'll have triage and everything there. So we'll work it out with the local ambulance district to have medics on site. Yeah. We'll have field marshals, everything. We hope that this will grow into something huge because the ultra marathon isn't that big in the U.S., but those that have gotten big, I mean, they get television, they get all of it.
Sounds like a cool concept to me.
Very cool.
And you already referenced the Angels at Abbey Gate, and that's where my wife and I volunteered and helped at that event last August.
That's a neat one.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, there's 13 launch points. We're actively right now trying to whittle that down to keep it at 13. The furthest one away is in Indiana. They come all the way from Indiana, Evansville, I believe, and they ride in together and they spend the night. Most of the other ones will all be semi-local, from St. Louis Harley-Davidson in South County to Ted's over in Grafton area, Alton area, Columbia, Missouri. They're all within generally a couple hours or half hour. But each one will sign up their own riders. Your entry fee is obviously a donation to the organization. Then everybody rallies to, in this case, it's going to be Mid-Rivers Mall outside the old Sears.
It was at JB last year.
Yeah. So they all met at South County Mall last year, and then they all come in together with police escort, which is a really neat thing to see. Bikers always come in first, followed by the Jeeps and sports cars and trucks.
It was really cool.
We learned each year what we did wrong. Last year, we did not have any tents and nowhere to sit. So it was a hot day, a relatively warm day that day. And so that would have been useful to have to keep people around longer.
Yeah.
So this year, we're all rallying at Mid-Rivers parking lot, the mall, outside Sears that used to be there because there's nobody using that lot. We'll get a police escort from there to Lakeside 370 Park in St. Peters.
Very cool.
Okay.
Great spot.
I'll have my drink truck there again. Go figure. But we'll also have Super Jam is playing. They're a phenomenal local band that do great cover music.
Yeah.
Journey and all that. So they'll be rocking the house. There's pavilions there, and there's picnic tables. We'll probably go ahead and rent a tent this time, too, along with some additional picnic tables to make sure that there's adequate shade and seating for people. Yeah. So we may or may not incorporate a car show into this or a bike show, too. I'm not sure. But my primary focus is the ride. We want everybody to obviously be safe, but it's a sight to see when everybody's coming down the highway.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to give a shout-out to Mike LeBlanc.
Yeah.
Another portion of the Angels of Abbey Gate event last August was the reading of the names and the tolling of the bell. What emotions went through you when that occurred?
It's just like taps for me. It's tough. I mean, it's so needed. He does such a good job. I've seen him do it at least 3 times now. A lot of people don't know the symbolism behind that setup.
He takes it very seriously.
Oh, yeah, he does. And he does a fantastic job. He's very respectful. I think somebody who's never heard it before and doesn't know what each, the empty wine glass, what that means, the lemon, all that. So it's a very crucial piece, and I'm glad that he did that.
Thank you for telling us about the Freedom 13 organization and the mission and the purpose. I think you're holding Jared's memory in great reverence, and he would be proud of the work that you're doing, Mark. I want to go back, and then I'll have another 1 or 2 things to say, and then I'll pass it back to Jason. A few days before that Gold Star Family Roundtable, through the House Foreign Affairs Committee, you were interviewed by Pete Hegseth, crazy enough, who's now the Secretary of War. At that point in time, he was a host on Fox. You'd already mentioned that Fox had been interviewing you multiple times. In that interview, you recalled the story from Dover Air Force Base. What you had said was, after the remains had been walked off of the aircraft and families were given time to grieve and be reunited with the remains of their children, a military commander had come up to you and asked for you to sort of reflect if Jared knew what would happen and could have avoided it. This military commander asked if you thought that he would. And you said no. He would have done the same thing.
He said if Jared had a 60-second heads up that what was about to happen was going to happen, what do you think he would do? And I said he wouldn't move because he loved his brothers and sisters so much that he knew that if he moved, it would be somebody else.
Yeah.
So I think my son always knew that. Maybe it's fair to say, maybe it's not, but I think in his heart of hearts, he knew if he was going to go out, he'd want to go out a Marine. And he didn't have a death wish by any means, but he cared about the Marine to his left and to his right as he's supposed to. And I think he took that to heart and definitely would not have. I mean, just knowing the stories from Tyler.
Sure.
Taylor Hoover was one that was killed. He was the oldest one that was killed. He'd been in Marines for years, and he was a sergeant, and he'd been on numerous deployments. And I know he had told his father this was ridiculous, how this was going down. And even after taking a blast, he was still alive at the time. And he took shrapnel everywhere throughout his body, face. Even then, he was handing out his magazines to Marines next to him. Wow. He's the one who stepped in when Captain Ball froze, couldn't do shit, literally did nothing, and started commanding everybody.
Incredible.
As he's bleeding out. And
what a warrior. There's
conflicting stories about his final breath, but some say he was there out on the dirt, outside the gate.
Yeah.
And others said he was in surgery, in the triage with the medical corpsman. My son came home relatively in one piece. I fully expected the worst. Yeah. And I know I freaked some people out because I was so utterly proud that my son was laying in the coffin, but he looked like my son. Yeah. For me, that was hugely important because having a closed casket would tear me in half. And having him not look like himself would tear me to pieces too. He was fortunate. There were many others that, unfortunately,
Unrecognizable.
And you were there. I mean, you heard the explosion. That thing was so freaking big.
Yeah.
The sheer power, I've been trying to find Marines that were there that knew my son and were near him when everything happened, so I could get some answers on
Put the pieces
closure
together.
Yeah. And, like to this day, I still don't know if my son was screaming for his mom or dad, or was it instant, and maybe to some that's trivial. For me, it's part of closure.
I understand that.
And I've been told by many that the sheer force of that explosion probably concussed him and immediately knocked him out.
Yeah.
I know he took shrapnel to the left cheek and it shattered all of his teeth, but his face was, when I saw him laying there, just a tiny little scar. They did such a great job cleaning him up and presenting him the best they possibly could. And that gave me some peace, and
Sure.
I know it's not the same for many, but we never want to see this happen again. I mean, you're in the military, you're in a high risk job. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but to die for stupidity
Sure.
is just, it's a rusty sword in your heart,
To die based off of bad planning.
or lack thereof. I mean, in general, I think of Benghazi,
Sure.
and some of the stuff that happened. It's just, I'm sure there's countless stories that I don't know about, and I tried to explain it to somebody once, and, people are shot up in the mountains, you're hit by a sniper round or whatever. And not that it makes it any easier, but at least they died in a firefight.
Yeah.
It's explainable.
Sure.
My son was helping save people. That's all he was trying to do, along with everybody else there. And now that we've lost our 13 senselessly, I'm left adopting thousands of other Marines that were there because I was told, and I don't know if this was from another Gold Star family that lives in California, because the military is chalking it up to drinking accidents, but supposedly there's been 9 that have committed suicide since coming back. Yeah. Whether it be, the guilt.
Yeah.
Survivor's guilt, they call it. They just keep chalking everything up to drinking accidents and stuff. And I'm like, maybe 1 or 2, but
doesn't add up.
No. These kids have seen things that, this is why I felt so compelled to create the camps we are. And again, I'm depending on the other outside organizations that can help these guys that have seen things like that and worse, probably,
Sure.
To help get through that. And I pray every day that this is a success and that people come out of it. I know just from volunteers that have come out, because we try to have a volunteer day, second Saturday of every month, where just anybody can come out and help.
Sure.
I've had veterans come up to me who have done other programs, and they said, this is the best thing I've ever done. I said, what do you mean? He goes, because you gave us a mission. Yeah. We showed up, and you told us this needs to get done, this needs to get done, and you left it up to us to decide which mission we wanted to take care of.
Sure.
And they got it done. Yeah. And then as soon as they got it done, they're out. But he said it was amazing because I felt a purpose again. And that's what a lot of guys miss, from what I'm told. When you get out, you're
the mission.
Right.
Yeah. So, we've heard that many times. There's one piece of your quote, and I'm sorry to go back, but there's one piece that really stuck with me, Mark, in that interview you did with Hegseth. After you finished recounting the story of that military commander asking you that hypothetical, I don't know if you recall this, but you said it made sense that Jared would have done it over and over again, even if he had the warning. It made sense. And I think a lot of people, myself included, would struggle to understand how could that make sense. Can you help explain that to us?
Well, that quote in particular, you'd have to know my son to understand it fully, I suppose. But he was so very passionate about the mission behind serving in the Marine Corps and how much he loved the guys he served with. And when he posed that question to me, I guess I responded that way because that's I don't even have to think about it. I know he wouldn't, as much as it would piss me off knowing he could have saved himself,
Sure.
If that was a scenario, he would still do it because, again, he knows that it'd be somebody else. And it's his duty. If that saves somebody else, then so be it. I mean, I'm not saying he did anything necessarily heroic at the actual moment because obviously it was an explosion, it just happened so fast. But if he had the knowledge and the whereabouts to know that you could either do this or you can do this, he would definitely, without a doubt, not take the alternative. He'd stand right where he was. No question.
I so appreciate you coming on, Mark, and spending time with Jason and me. And just as an observer, I feel this really special ambiance since you are a Gold Star father and Jason is a Gold Star son. And I so appreciate being in the presence of you two gentlemen. For my part, I don't think there's any better way to end my questioning by just reading the epitaph that is on Jared's tombstone at the Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery. Jared Marcus Schmitz, beloved son, brother, and best friend. Above all, a Marine. I don't think Jared would have had it any other way.
No, and his mother wrote that, actually, so kudos to her. She did a good job. I couldn't have summed it up any better.
Thanks for your time, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Ethan, thank you for that. Man, that was beautiful. Thank you for reading that to us. I kind of was writing some notes while Mark was you and Mark were talking about these last couple things and kind of trying to ponder of what would be appropriate for me to say in this scenario. And I'll just summarize what my thoughts were that I wrote down. And I said, Mark, Mark, we share an experience that neither of us ever wanted to have, but of course we're extremely proud of our service member. Our heroes are with us every day and in every way. We already know, based on what you said before, that Jared has your 6. And that can bring a sense of peace, at least some sort of peace, knowing that Jared's got you, man. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time to share with us your heart, to share with us your vision, and
to share Jared with us.
And to share Jared with us, yeah. And it just goes to show you that we know where Jared got it from, man. You want to help people, you want to be the difference, and to Jared, thank you, brother. Thank you for giving of yourself. Thank you for serving your country. And thank you for being the best of who we are. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and sign off of the Operation Insight podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum.